everyone, and welcome to our direct-to-consumer webinar. I'm Krista Mitchell, a Marketing Associate at BookNet Canada, and our host today is Brian O'Leary, founder and principal of Magellan Media Consulting, which works with publishers to improve how they create, manage, and distribute content. He writes extensively about issues affecting publishing and has edited a book entitled A Futurist Manifesto, a collection of forward-looking essays on publishing. He's also the author of research reports on the use of metadata in the book industry supply chain, territorial rights in the digital age, and best practices in digital exports. He's studied the impact of free content and digital piracy on paid book sales and was the editor and primary contributor to a study of the use of XML in book publishing. We'll do a question and answer period at the end, so during the presentation, please share any questions you have using the chat feature, and we'll answer them when Brian gives us the okay. I will pass things over to Brian now.
Great. All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to thank BookNet Canada and the staff for hosting this event and inviting me to share the thoughts that I have with you today. I'm a big fan of BookNet Canada and the work that it does to support the Canadian book industry and the supply chain overall. And as you're probably aware, they've done a tremendous amount of work working with other associations, including Book Industry Study Group here in the United States, to extend the use of metadata throughout the supply chain, as well as to partner on a new use for BiblioShare. So it's great. It's a great opportunity on my behalf to give back and do some stuff that is beneficial for the audience. Today's talk actually is an extension or an evolution of one that I started at Tech Forum earlier this year, and it has actually 5 specific parts. The first is I'm going to talk about how direct marketing is actually already shaping book publishing, and I'll use, I think, a half dozen different examples. The second part is to talk about conversion architectures, the component of direct-to-consumer marketing, how they work for, within DTC marketing, but also how they apply to book publishing. We'll take a little bit of a road down to explain how publishers are well-positioned for DTC, and what they can do now. We have 8 specific ideas to prepare for DTC sales. And then I think at that point, especially if the time allows, we'll stop for a little bit and take the questions that you have on that, because the last section, which is how publishers can be good content partners for other companies, is a little bit different. We can do it either in detail or as an overview, but I want to make sure we capture the questions on the first 4 sections first. So, if we could, I'd like to start by talking about the ways that direct-to-consumer marketing is already shaping book publishing. Now, keep in mind that the traditional model, the one that we're most familiar with, results primarily in the sale of either a physical or a digital object. We have necessarily a trade mindset, and we don't typically think about using content to attract readers as a step toward establishing ongoing direct relationships. But that is the fundamental basis for DTC sales. We don't really think that much about understanding the experiences our readers have with our content beyond the moment at which the books are bought. And there are some exceptions with respect to platforms like Goodreads, but fundamentally we're really looking at managing our relationships with the trade. But I think there are exceptions, and those exceptions may in certain instances come to be the rule. Nearly 3 years ago, HarperCollins US appointed a director of audience development, a role that's classically reserved actually for periodical publishers. More recently, Kobo announced the launch of its ebook data service, and that's an opportunity actually to better understand things like drop-off, persistence, and completion rates for books. Proponents of such features point out that they can highlight early success of mid-list titles, and they can also inform how PR and social media efforts are deployed. And I think as the number of titles that are assessed by these data services grows, so too does the ability of those services to help publishers benchmark reader behavior and surface a book that might otherwise be missed in a crowded field. In a similar way, the growth of subscription services, such as 24 Symbols, Scribd, and until recently Oyster, as well as series-specific sites like Pottermore, I think these illustrate ways in which direct-to-consumer models are starting to affect how publishers approach their business. Now, I've tried to encourage publishers that I talk to and work with to think about using subscription models as a direct response opportunity to test demand for various types of content. We could also consider subscription models and e-reading platforms as options to measure persistence, how long a reader stays with a book. Having built an audience, a publisher might also offer membership benefits to loyal or highly engaged readers. These value-added efforts can take a lot of forms, and some of them we're going to talk about in the course of this talk today. I think as one example, consider Scribner's decision announced last fall to revive its iconic early 20th century magazine as a digital publication that's made available on a weekly basis. The magazine offers behind-the-scenes stories about things like authors' reading lists, approaches to writing, and the story of published works. The goal isn't to sell the magazine, but to build relationships with the people who will buy the books the magazine was launched to cover. A similar case can be made for the Oyster Review, which was a collection of criticism, culture, essays, and other content about books. Admittedly, it was short-lived, but its launch plan included personalized content, targeted calls to action. In fact, when Oyster announced its decision to hire Kevin Wynn to become its editor, it added, "We believe the best product lies in the pairing of high-quality editorial with our work in personalization, data science, and design." Now, I think we all recognize that direct response marketing won't work for every type of book, nor will it work for every type of reader, but it does give publishers who try it an opportunity to interact directly with readers in ways that can refine both the content that they create and the forms that they use to deliver it. So to strengthen that claim, let me start by talking about how conversion architectures work as a part of content marketing. Now, you may already be familiar with the work required to attract, retain, and monetize an audience. These activities are often shown stacked in a funnel, as they are here, with the widest part at the top reserved for prospecting or attracting a potential audience. The narrowest part at the bottom represents a subset that become paying customers, or at least pay for something as a result of the prior work. On the web, attracting an audience of potential buyers is done through search and search optimization, social media, referral traffic, as well as promotion using offline formats that can include print and ebooks. The cost of acquiring a potential customer in that environment can be quite low. Once a potential buyer is aware, many web retailers, the ones that we have all used, have successfully used other vehicles like email newsletters, content updates, and promotional offers to retain a portion of the initial audience. The key here is simple. You have to obtain a valid email address. Although many retailers focus on selling products, an audience can also provide value through sponsorships, subscriptions, and live events. A relationship with an audience also provides cost-effective opportunities to sell related products. Now, I think that publishers are well positioned for direct-to-consumer sales. There are three reasons for this. You see the value of conversion architectures in content marketing, but you may wonder, can publishers really compete? I'd strongly argue yes, as publishers have already acquired the skills that are required to compete effectively as content marketers. In fact, publishers can deliver on the promise of conversion architectures in content marketing because they're established as content curators, and that's a core component of effective content marketing. They're among the best able to recognize and know how to tell great stories. And they're already in the business of linking content to markets, and that's the purpose of content marketing. We'll take you to these in turn and add a little bit more detail, starting with the idea that publishers are already accomplished curators. Across social media platforms, marketers can use content to reach audiences, and whether the content is owned or aggregated, it is effectively curated, chosen with the target audience in mind. Again, this is an area in which publishers excel. The industry already understands how to develop and publish content that provides value to readers, creates opportunities to interact more frequently with those readers, showcases content depth in a specific area, and then earns attention from target influentials, that is, reviewers, book bloggers, and the like, ultimately multiplying effectiveness. Consumers value the content providers, and these are not necessarily publishers, but they certainly can be, the content providers who can gather information and share recommended links or resources. Bundling the work of others can be an effective way to provide value, interact with prospects, showcase expertise, and ultimately gain visibility. And so too can mindful sharing of our published content. To illustrate how far ahead of the curve publishers are in the area of storytelling, I decided to draw on something that Scott Ottman wrote for the Content Marketing Institute. Ottman's post, dating back about a year and a half, explained how Businessweek, the magazine, began as an in-house publication for a furniture maker, A.W. Shaw. External demand for the publication led the owner to sell the magazine ultimately to people outside the company. After proving the concept, he sold the rights to McGraw-Hill, which owned Businessweek actually until 2009, now owned by Bloomberg. And the success story that inspired Ottman led to him to remind us of what works in content marketing. The first of these things is high-quality content. Shaw's content benchmark was to make it so good that people would pay for it. And even though he was a furniture maker, Shaw thought like a publisher. Specifically, he understood his target audience and its immediate and longer-term needs, and he created content that helped his audience address those needs. He also focused on niches. He didn't try to serve everyone. He picked the markets where he was able to develop and provide a superior solution. He found great value in developing his own style, a unique voice that stood out, and he understood that his audience expected a clear point of view. Now, if I were to poll everybody listening this afternoon, I think they would all say that they could have predicted points on Ottman's list, and the reason is clear. Effective storytelling, these 5 areas, are at the heart of what publishers do. Finally, with respect to linking content to markets, publishers have long been in the business of actually doing this. We evaluate titles on their merits, and in doing so, we think carefully about the readers who would buy a particular book. The links we make are often intuitive, with success is backed by years of trial and sometimes error. Still, understanding how audiences look for, read, share, and recommend content is in our nature, even if we haven't always measured it. We're also accustomed to the idea that we can give away content to help sell it. Galleys, ARCs, and Blads are examples of the way that we traditionally have tried to build word of mouth by giving away early looks at a book. Typically, these samples were distributed through the trade, and as with decisions we made about what books to publish, the measurement might not be precise, but we recognize the value in building awareness of a book by using the content of the book itself. I mean, free is not bad. Whoever decided to put shares in bookstores was a content marketing genius. That insight was more recently extended to provide sample content directly to readers through features like Amazon's search inside the book. For the most part, only the platforms know the extent to which these samples turn prospects into readers, a situation that some partners like Kobo are working to change. But the traditional and I think emerging marketing efforts share a common characteristic. They rely on content to help sell our product, books. In that sense, publishers have been acting as content marketers for decades. Now, we need to use the data available to us to refine our understanding of how prospects find, consume, and respond to our content. Now, to better understand those interactions, I think that publishers can try using things like journey maps, which are a visual or graphic representation or interpretation of an individual's relationship with an organization, service, product, or brand over time and across channels. The journeys maps from the reader's perspective. Journey mapping itself can help publishers in a number of ways, providing data that allows us to connect, collaborate, and align around reader interests. Now, in mapping a reader's step-by-step journey, it's useful to look upstream to understand prior experiences, how they became aware of things, and downstream, after purchase, to see what a customer does as a result of their interactions. The journey maps can also be decidedly low-tech. Wall maps, Post-it notes, and visual aids are actually the preferred tools. And the need for them, for effective journey maps, is probably growing. A couple of years back, I said it's much easier to deal with an overarching platform than it is to figure out how to market at a small scale. And again, in direct-to-consumer, you're looking at marketing at a small scale. But I also said the web isn't a community of millions, it's millions of communities. More to the point, Jim Bankoff, who founded Vox Media here in the United States, describe the challenge this way: the audience isn't sports fans or people interested in health, but rather New York Rangers fans or those suffering from gout. We need to think about being that specific. So we're particularly well positioned, I think, for those three reasons to work as content marketers, but there's a significant but. And for that, I go back to Content Marketing Institute founder Joe Polizzi, who said almost 4 years ago, if we use DTC approaches only to sell a book, we've failed. I think the content conversion architectures represent a significant shift in the way that most publishers think about our business. I think our current focus ultimately does result primarily in the sale of those objects. But as we move to the web and work to organize communities, at least some of our content can be used to attract audiences to a given digital destination. That's where the conversion architectures and content marketing come in. But we have to offer potential readers a reason to visit and still more reasons to stay and return. So what else is there? I think this is where the model for conversion architectures that I presented a few minutes ago can be useful. If you look to the right, search, social media, referral traffic, and even legacy sources like traffic from our trade sites can help recruit audiences that are interested in the topic, not just the format. In a similar way, periodic planned email efforts can offer subscribers multiple pathways to discovery and purchase. And then ultimately, we need to be thinking about offering a range of products, subscriptions, books, videos, sponsorships, and even live events as examples. All provide opportunities to monetize an audience. And I think this is what the DTC opportunity represents. It's a focus on content strategy, not just a new or different channel strategy. If we try to compete against Amazon selling directly to consumers, we fail. I think we really need to be thinking about reaching audiences with specific aspects of our content. The second implication, I think, then, is that imprints themselves become platforms, but they have to be focused. A broad-based imprint is going to really struggle if it doesn't have a really clear value proposition for an audience. And then the third piece is that we need to be able to leverage both free, which is samples and gifts, and paid content to grow audience and increase monetization across multiple products. And that strategy will probably differ publisher to publisher, imprint to imprint, as it rolls out. So I mentioned at the outset that we put together a set of 8 things that we thought would be useful to try in the near term, by now in the next year or so, and to test what works as well as to give you an opportunity to learn more. At a high level, these are the 8, and we're going to go through each of them in the slides that follow. Before I do that, I want to say this isn't an exhaustive list, but I think these 8 ideas are a good start. I'm sure that as you talk to other folks, both in your own house and folks who do consulting like me and work in this space, they'll have other perspectives, and I'm not really arguing against them, but this is a pretty good list. So with respect to search, social, and referral marketing, one of the most important things to do in this setting is to grow your understanding of how these things work. And ideally, I'd recommend making it putting somebody senior in charge of it, not just an IT or web assignment. That person should not only be in charge of implementing it, but also coming back and reporting to everyone on best practices. It's also an opportunity to evaluate how ready you are from your own perspective, how ready you are to implement best practices in marketing directly to consumers. A second opportunity is to inventory your content, to see what might work in a format valued by your target audience. Start by picking a niche to focus on. Review your published and marketing content for the opportunities as well as the challenges. It's possible that the marketing materials you have in-house were written, if it's possible, it's also likely that they were written for a trade or a supplier relationship. And if so, that's important to know early, especially if you're going to use some of that material to cultivate more direct relationships. Within that realm, I'd say, ask yourself, what could be packaged differently to better serve the audiences that you're trying to reach? You want to use a critical eye at this point to address the content that needs an update to better address or serve a consumer audience. And you also have to be mindful of your list. Can you truly offer a critical mass of differentiated content? It's a crowded universe, and marketing alone probably won't carry the day. You need to be clear to yourselves and to the target audience how you provide value for that audience. Now, one of the visual that you see actually here on the right is my own. I'm not marketing directly to consumers. I'm really in a B2B environment. But this is effectively it's a screenshot of a set of topics, publishing strategy, publishing tactics, and there are others associated with it. And then a variety of different subtopics within each of these that I've either written a post about or plan to in the next several months. This kind of planning is critically important because I've backed up from a publishing audience to a specific need in a way to serve them. And it's this level of detail, I think, that you also have to be thinking about as you inventory your own content, both what you have and what you need to develop. There's an opportunity, too, to leverage longer-form content. People actually do read longer-form content online, and search results favor relevant longer-form content. And so when you do that inventory that I mentioned in the prior slide, ask yourself, what can we offer our audiences to attract and retain them? That's the backbone of DTC marketing. Within longer-form content, you want to do things like test calls to action. These are the things that point readers to other relevant content, or even purchase opportunities for books and other products. When you post longer-form content, you want to make sure that things like meta tags and rich snippets, the components of SEO that are critically important on the web, you want to make sure that they accurately describe your content in ways that the audiences you want to reach will recognize and respond to. This is an area where the trade description probably won't work. Think about ways that your target audience will talk about the question or interest that they have or the problem that they're trying to solve. That language is more likely to be discovered when you're searching online. I think you want to also start to take steps, and probably many people on this call are already doing some of this, to measure what you do. It's okay to start with simple measures and grow from there. Try tracking the number of followers and subscribers. You want to look for higher levels of engagement. You can do that using services like Bitly, which provides users with the ability to track when readers click on links to curated content. You want to track brand recognition. How familiar is an average person with your imprint, for example? We organize a great deal of our marketing around some of those. And if it's not really carrying the day, then either another way to bring attention to your site or bring attention to your content is going to be critical to develop. Goal setting is an area generally where a fair share of content marketers fall short, but it's good here, and this is something that you can do in the next year, to start by setting both short-term and longer-term goals, and then tracking actual results and asking you the question, what does this mean? One area that you might also think about is growth in untapped markets, particularly outside your home territory. As was mentioned in the start of the talk, I've done work for Lever Canada Books that specifically looked at territorial rights in the digital age and best practices for digital exports. And I think there are good opportunities for English language and French language Canadian content outside of Canada, and the web gives you an opportunity to take advantage of that. That was my tea break. It's important, I think, too, to develop a voice. Now, books always have a voice. I mean, this is what authors bring to it. But we want to also bring an audience in to think that they're interacting not just with a collection of assets or formats, but rather that they're talking to somebody who thinks about the things that they care about. So cultivating that audience starts with a voice and takes practice. I think authors know this, and that gives many of them a head start on their publishing colleagues. But to attract and retain an audience, you want to think about ways to connect with people who might value it. One thing that you can do is test multiple content forms. Posting the same type of content over and over tends to wear out online followers. The goal is to get readers ultimately to sign up to give you an email, and that's the starting point for a relationship that you later monetize. To help make that happen, you want to be prepared to respond to comments and reader questions. You want to build relationships, and the dialogue helps you do that. And while it seems obvious, it's worth making the point that promoting your products online is a delicate dance. Providing valuable content itself builds the relationships, but you can't exploit the relationship relentlessly. I mentioned a couple of slides ago testing calls to action, but I think you also want to think carefully about your calls to action. I'll go back to what Joe Polizzi said in his post at the Content Marketing Institute. If we only sell a book, if that's our outcome, then we've failed. Not every content passage, not every blog post, not every social media interaction is going to result in a sale. You want to be mindful of the value of keeping a prospect close enough to obtain an email. You want to learn about their interests and behaviors before you contact them with subsequent content and multiple offers. And you want to mine the data that you can collect for insight, not just for volume. Now, kind of an insider post in this regard, but you want to think about nurturing your infrastructure. You can't neglect the basics. You want to, particularly if you've been working only in a trade environment to this point, you need to think about making your content shareable using click-to-tweet buttons. You want to optimize your sharing buttons to reflect where your target audiences are. If you're trying to reach people who are predominantly reading content and interacting on LinkedIn, while you might still offer a Facebook option, the fundamental is that you won't reach as many people as you need to be. If you're planning to bring people back to your site, and I hope you are, that's one of the significant opportunities, make sure that it does things like loads quickly, particularly on mobile platforms. The example that I'm using here, the Magellan site, again, it's a B2B audience, but you can see even on a mobile device, this is on my iPhone. The post shows up in full, the image is clear, you're seeing only one thing, so it's optimized for mobile, and the sharing buttons, to me, sometimes feel a little bit too big, but they're certainly big enough to tap. And while I might not like that they obscure some of the things I've written, the reality is that those are the kinds of trade-offs you need to be able to make in a small screen environment. And then finally, I'd say think about hosting a live event. This is not as easy or straightforward as some of the other things I'm suggesting, but it can be instructive. For any publisher, your authors are draws, and you want to look for ways to make them stars in a person-to-person setting. If you focus on an audience and its needs, not just a format or list, then I think you're going to find natural opportunities. There's some good examples here in the United States of success of Book Expo's BookCon and attracting an audience. Also some industry notoriety, but it's still a significant number of people attending. It illustrates the opportunity you have in reaching out to readers. An example I particularly like actually comes from Harvard Common Press, which is the image to the right here, which hosts food-related events, sometimes at its offices and elsewhere, convening, and this is the example I picked up, some of Boston's most active food bloggers for conversation, as well as an opportunity to test recipes from the press's own list. This is not an expensive option for them. It's very much in keeping with the size and the nature of the imprint, and it's an excellent opportunity to build buzz and support for using the content in really interesting ways, in this case in the live event. So one of the things that I started out at the beginning here is to say that I thought publishers can be good content partners. That's particularly true for content marketers in industries and niches that would benefit from distinctive, high-quality content. The easiest sales might come from imprints specializing in content of value to specific audiences, but not always. But in the instance where there's pure alignment between, for example, cooking content and a cooking appliance-related company, the result would be win-win. Publishers would gain more sales of existing or adapted content, and the content marketers would benefit from greater effectiveness, increased loyalty, and sales growth for their products. But this alignment need not be perfect. It might actually seem counterintuitive, but the most powerful kind of content a marketer might offer could actually be content that doesn't directly focus on its core business or industry. In fact, a publisher's own experience with DTC sales could help it become a better partner for other companies, as it could offer advice on the kind of content and forms that help develop relationships and ultimately sales. Now, just as an example, go to a chart, or actually 3 charts that we have here. Each year, the Content Marketing Institute, which is a pretty good resource if you're interested in delving deeper in this, conducts a survey of smaller businesses, company it defines as having between 10 and 99 employees. It's an interesting market, particularly for companies whose size reflect the majority of book publishers in North America, particularly in Canada. The annual survey that they conduct asks a range of questions. CMI itself then reports the results to a wider audience, to folks who want to keep up with what works in content marketing. So today, for this afternoon's talk, I picked up 3 sets of answers that I think help frame how publishers can be effective content marketing partners. This list is the top 10 challenges small business marketers said they face. So if you look at this, the top of them were producing engaging content, producing content consistently, and producing a variety of content. Publishers represent an important resource for content marketers, I think, who face challenges doing things like producing and doing these 3 things. And content marketers themselves are on really solid ground in thinking about publishers as partners in developing a content strategy. The second chart I had was a list of the most frequently used content marketing tactics. This actually is ranked from most used social media down to the 10th, which is webinars and webcasts. Perhaps some of these are going to be more important than others to various types of businesses, but there's a common theme within almost all of these, which is a strong preference for essentially textual content. And then the last piece is what's the most effective content marketing tactic? This is the same group of respondents who said who answered the previous 2 sets of questions, and they consistently said the most effective content marketing tactic, tied for first with webinars, were ebooks. Now, in our business right now, we think of these as kind of plateau-bound orphan formats that the ebook revolution is over, but they have a very strong life in the content marketing universe. And I think the reasons are simple. They offer value, they offer persistence. They're also cost-effective, and for a content marketing partner, a prospect that might return to a well-chosen ebook on more than one occasion, each time they do that, they're directly or indirectly remembering the marketer who offered the book. So if you think about these three charts together, you get a pretty good picture of what's going on in the content marketing space. Reports like this one from the Content Marketing Institute confirm that publishing skills, the producing and engaging content, doing so consistently and across a variety of forms, are a critical part of effective content marketing efforts. They also show that something we already know how to do, create and make books available, is seen as it's an effective tactic in the content marketing space. On another level, though, I think the data points out an immediate, perhaps growing need for publishing skills in book, or at least book-like content, in the content marketing space. Beyond direct and perhaps special sales, publishers whose lists align with an industry or an audience might find themselves supplying not just products, but also expertise. And that's an opportunity, but not to simply sell an incremental number of units. Partnership and collaboration might involve a book, but we also need to be mindful of limitations inherent in our conception of the book. Much as we want to keep the consumer's needs in mind when we implement DTC marketing strategies, we want to keep a content partner's needs in mind when we're trying to forge a relationship. So I think if I could just go back to the start, the points I wanted to make. The first is that there are several examples that are provided, and there are many more if you take a look around, that illustrate how direct marketing is already shaping book publishing. I think that the model that I've offered today of conversion architectures can guide direct-to-consumer marketing efforts. I also think that publishers have the skill sets and the experience that make them well-positioned for direct-to-consumer sales. There are 8 different things that we've presented that give you a sense of what you might be doing in the next 6 to 12 months to better understand and prepare for DTC sales. And I think that there's a significant opportunity to become a content partner with other companies. Now, given how steeped we are in trade and other institutional relationships, some of what I proposed might feel uncomfortable, even foreign at times. And if it does, I'd say still try taking some of those 8 steps, asking yourself along the way how you might translate what you're learning into new or different ways to attract, retain, and serve an audience. And the one thing I probably would want you to avoid the most, which is doubling down on the prevailing model without trying at least some of what I've outlined today. And with that, take any more questions if we have them.
We do have a question right now, and if anyone else has any questions out there, just type them in and we'll read them to Brian. The first question is, do you use a special tool to manage your strategic and tactical content?
Yes, I do. It's actually proprietary with a company based in Toronto called Allroads. It's about $50 a month to do it. It's a tool they specifically did, but it's not. There's also products from companies like Mindmeister, MINDMEISTER, that do a similar thing. If you Content Marketing Institute as a resource will tell you some of those in terms of it's both ideation, which is what should I be writing about it and how should I organize it, as well as content tracking and queuing things. A second thing, in an operational sense, strong arguments for the use of Hootsuite and or some of the add-ons that allow you to schedule things, posts of different sorts. The nice thing about the Hootsuite won't help you with this, but the nice thing about Mindmeister and the proprietary tool that I use from Allroads are that you can also tag in other dimensions like the nature of the post. So, for example, if I'm writing a history of the industry kind of post, and that's the only one I write, after a while we've covered all of it, but they'll remind you that you can do other things like make recommendations or provide industry news or talk about how to succeed at a specific something. In my case, workflow revision and implementation. You can highlight guest authors or testimonials, perhaps conduct a sweepstake or make predictions. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of different formats that you can try. And the more specific you can be and then roll them up and say, how many posts have I done that effectively provide recommendations? And if the answer is relatively low, or for that matter, relatively high, then you know that you need to change something. So those are there's a whole host of tools, but two that I'm probably most fun with are the Allroads proprietary tool and Mindmeister.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'd like to thank Brian for taking the time to walk us through his presentation, and it was great. We'll be sure to share slides and a video recording of the webinar very soon, so keep an eye out for that. If you have any feedback on this webinar or suggestions for future topics, please get in touch by emailing media@booknetcanada.ca. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.